Ancient civilizations mastered the art of climate control. This journey reveals how they engineered entire societies to bend with the seasons, not break, and you will leave with a powerful blueprint for resilience you can see in our world today. We will explore silent stone calendars that track the sun and vast underground rivers carved by hand to green the desert. How did a city thrive without a single river? And why did a mighty empire carefully measure the floodwaters each year? Their solutions were woven into everything, from the layout of a city street to the very seeds they chose to plant. It is a story of brilliant adaptation that holds urgent lessons for our own future. What forgotten innovation from the past do you think could help us most today? A lone figure stands on a windswept hill under a sea of stars. This is no ordinary knight. In their hands, a piece of bone or a smooth river stone, and with each passing season, a new mark is carefully etched into its surface. This simple act, repeated across millennia and continents, represents humanity's first great engineering project. It was not a dam or a canal, but a calendar. Before any stone was laid for a temple or a seed planted in a field, our ancestors became master observers of the natural world. Their survival depended on it. They were the original climate scientists, tracking not with satellites, but with their own eyes, memorizing the subtle dance of the heavens and the earth. They watched the sun's path shift along the horizon, marking the longest and shortest days with stones that still stand, like the silent sentinels of Stonehenge. These were not just monuments, they were colossal calculators in stone, predicting solstices and equinoxes with breathtaking precision. They monitored the swelling of rivers, learning to read the water's height like a gauge for the coming season's bounty. They noted the precise timing of bird migrations and the flowering of specific plants. Understanding these were nature's own alerts, signaling when to plant, when to harvest, when to move to higher ground. Perhaps the most elegant example comes from the banks of the Nile. Ancient Egyptian priests meticulously tracked the star Sirius. They noticed that just before the Nile's life-giving flood would arrive each year, Sirius would reappear in the pre-dawn sky, a brilliant herald of the coming waters. This celestial event became their annual alarm clock, telling an entire civilization to prepare their fields for the inundation that would fertilize the land. This knowledge was not kept in books but woven into stories, songs, and rituals passed down through generations. It was a living database of environmental data. Their entire society was tuned to these rhythms, a symphony composed by the cosmos itself. This deep, patient observation was the essential blueprint, the first line of code in the program of civilization. It allowed them to move from simply reacting to the environment to anticipating it, and with that anticipation came the power to build. But that deep celestial knowledge needed an earthly counterpart. The real test came when the unpredictable waters arrived. Nowhere was this challenge more dramatic or the human response more transformative than in the land between two rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates did not offer a gentle, predictable flood like the Nile. Their waters were a chaotic, often violent force, arriving with spring melt from distant mountains, capable of washing away entire settlements or leaving the land parched if they failed. To survive here was to declare war on chaos itself, and the people of Mesopotamia chose to build. They became the world's first hydraulic engineers, and their weapon of choice was the humble canal. This was not a single ditch, but an ever-expanding, meticulously planned network. They dug vast channels to divert floodwaters away from cities and into storage basins. They built strong earthen dikes, reinforced with reeds and bitumen, to contain the river's fury. And they constructed intricate lattices of smaller feeder canals to deliver life-giving water to fields far from the riverbanks. Imagine the scale of this undertaking, accomplished with tools of wood, stone, and copper. It was a collective effort of staggering proportion, requiring thousands of people to dig, maintain, and manage the flow. This gave rise to something new in human history, a centralized authority powerful enough to coordinate such a vast workforce. Kings and priests became not just rulers, but chief engineers, their legitimacy tied directly to their ability to keep the water flowing and the food growing. The city of Ur stands as a monumental testament to this system. Its legendary wealth, its towering ziggurat, its bustling markets, all rested on a foundation of expertly managed water. Canals brought goods to its docks and water to its surrounding farmlands, creating the agricultural surplus that freed people to become artisans, merchants, and scribes. But the system had a constant enemy, silt. The very rivers that brought water also brought fine sediment that would clog the canals. Maintenance was a never-ending battle, a yearly ritual of dredging that every citizen likely participated in. To lift water from the canals to the higher fields, they invented the shaduf, a simple but brilliant counterweight lever that allowed one person to lift substantial amounts of water with rhythmic, efficient motion. It is a device you can still see in use today. So consider this: our modern cities rely on hidden grids of pipes and treatment plants, a system largely invisible to us. In Mesopotamia, the infrastructure was the landscape. Their canals were the lifeblood of the empire, visible to all, requiring constant communal care. This intimate, visible relationship with the source of their survival forged a unique kind of society, one engineered from the ground up, quite literally, for resilience. And while they tamed the rivers for their fields, another civilization faced an even more daunting proposition. How do you build a metropolis of grandeur in a place where it almost never rains at all? The Nile offered a different kind of promise, one of breathtaking regularity. While Mesopotamia's engineers wrestled with chaos, Egypt's planners worked with a rhythm. Each year, as reliably as the rising sun, the great river would swell, fed by distant monsoon rains in the Ethiopian highlands. It would spill over its banks, not with destructive fury, but with a gentle, life-giving embrace, depositing a fresh layer of rich, black silt across the floodplain. This was not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be received. Egyptian civilization became a masterpiece of synchronization, engineering its entire society to move in time with the river's pulse. Their year was divided into 3 seasons, each dictating the rhythm of life for every person, from pharaoh to farmer. It was the inundation, a time of flooding when the land disappeared under a vast, shallow lake. With fields underwater, this became a period of communal labor maintained by the state for grand projects like pyramid construction or canal maintenance. Next came Perit, the emergence when the waters receded, leaving behind that fertile mud. This was the season of sowing, as the entire nation turned to planting in the damp, perfect soil. Finally, Shemu arrived, the drought or harvest season, when the river was low and the crops were gathered under the hot sun. To manage this cycle, they developed an elegant and low-technology system called Basin irrigation. They built low earthen walls to partition the floodplain into a series of large, shallow basins. When the flood came, sluice gates would be opened, allowing water and silt to flood into each basin, where it would soak into the earth for weeks. Then the gates were closed, trapping the moisture and fertility. It was a way of storing the flood's bounty directly in the soil itself. The key to making this system work was precise measurement. Enter the Nilometer, a brilliant piece of civic engineering. These were stone staircases or marked columns, often housed in beautiful, temple-like structures that descended directly into the river. Priests and officials would carefully record the water's height against the markings. A rise too low meant a poor harvest and potential hardship. A rise too high could mean destructive flooding. This data was sacred, directly informing tax assessments, grain allocations, and the very stability of the kingdom. It was a tangible link between the celestial order and earthly administration. This harmony with the river was reflected in their deepest philosophy, the concept of Mot. Mot represented truth, balance, and cosmic order. A predictable Nile flood was the ultimate expression of Mot in the physical world. A good pharaoh upheld Mot, and a well-measured flood was proof of his divine mandate. Their engineering was not just practical, it was a spiritual act maintaining the balance of the universe. One of the most ambitious projects to uphold this balance was in the Fayum Oasis. Middle Kingdom engineers transformed a natural depression into a massive regulated reservoir by digging a canal to connect it to the Nile. They could now capture excess floodwater, store it in the Fayum Lake, and release it during dry years, smoothing out the river's occasional irregularities. It was an early form of risk management on a colossal scale. Egypt's story teaches a profound lesson in alignment. For thousands of years, they prospered not by conquering nature, but by listening to it, measuring its rhythms, and designing a civilization that danced to its tune. Their resilience was built on predictability, but what happens when a culture faces the opposite, an environment of relentless, unpredictable scarcity? Our journey now turns to a landscape where water was not a rhythmic gift, but a hidden treasure, and where survival meant learning to pull life directly from the stone. Far to the east, where the mighty Indus River carves its path, a different kind of urban miracle was taking shape. While Egypt built for the sun and Mesopotamia for the flood, the people of the Indus Valley engineered for the downpour. Their cities, like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were masterclasses in anticipation, built to withstand the fury of the seasonal monsoon and protect the health of every citizen. Walk through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, and you are not just seeing an ancient city, you are walking through a meticulously planned machine for living. The entire settlement was raised on a massive, man-made platform of mud brick, a crucial first line of defense against the river's floodwaters. Streets were laid out in a precise grid pattern, wide and straight, but the true genius lay beneath your feet. Running alongside almost every street was a sophisticated, covered drainage system. Each home had its own bathing area and drains that fed into these street channels, which were meticulously constructed from standardized, kiln-fired bricks. These drains were covered with stone slabs or bricks, preventing debris from clogging them and stopping disease from spreading. They sloped gently but deliberately, ensuring that wastewater and rainwater would flow efficiently out of the city and into larger covered sewers. This was not a luxury for the elite, it was a civic standard, a feature of even the most modest neighborhoods. At the heart of Mohenjo-Daro stands the Great Bath, a large, watertight pool built with finely fitted bricks and a layer of natural tar to prevent leaks. While its exact ceremonial purpose is debated by scholars, its existence speaks volumes about the culture's relationship with water and cleanliness. It represents a communal investment in purity and well-being, a central place for rituals that likely reinforced social cohesion. Every home also had access to clean water, supplied by an incredible network of brick-lined wells, strategically placed throughout the city blocks. This focus on separating clean water from wastewater, on managing the torrential rains, and on ensuring public hygiene was unprecedented in its scale and planning. Archaeologists note that the uniformity of the bricks, with their consistent proportions across hundreds of miles of the civilization, suggests a remarkable level of shared technical knowledge and possibly central planning. This was engineering for collective resilience. The system was designed to handle the predictable challenge of the monsoon, channeling the deluge away from homes and streets, preventing the stagnant pools that breed illness. It protected the community from the waterborne challenges that have plagued human settlements throughout history. How did this focus on sanitation contribute to their stability? A healthy population is a productive, stable population. By engineering their cities to actively promote public health, they likely reduced the toll of seasonal illnesses, creating a more reliable workforce and fostering a sense of shared civic order and safety. Their grid-like streets and uniform architecture suggest a society that valued harmony and collective welfare over individual display. In many ways, the Indus Valley presents a hauntingly modern model of urban climate resilience. They understood that engineering was not just about securing food, but about safeguarding the community itself from the environmental pressures of their world. Their silent, empty streets today stand as a powerful testament to a civilization that, for a time, mastered the art of living well together in a challenging landscape. This concept of engineering for communal well-being takes on a breathtaking new form as we cross an ocean, where an empire did not just manage water but worshipped it, building mountains of stone to converse with the rain itself. High in the thin air of the Andes, a different kind of climate puzzle emerged. Here, civilizations like the Inca inherited a landscape of breathtaking extremes, where steep slopes met deep valleys, and a single night's frost could wipe out a season's food. Their challenge was not a flooding river, but a vertical world of relentless gradients. To survive, they did not just farm the land, they engineered it, sculpting the mountains themselves into a masterpiece of resilience. Their primary tool was the terrace. These were not simple garden steps, but massive, complex structures. Workers would first build a retaining wall from precisely fitted stones without any mortar, creating a strong barrier against landslides. Behind this wall, they layered gravel for drainage, then richer soil, often carried up from the valley floors. The result was a series of flat, fertile platforms cascading down slopes that were previously unusable. But the genius was in the details. These terraces did more than just create flat land, they created microclimates. The stone walls absorbed heat from the sun during the day and slowly released it through the cold night, raising the temperature around the crops just enough to protect them from killing frost. They also slowed rainwater runoff, allowing it to seep deep into the soil instead of washing the precious earth away, combating erosion on a grand scale. This was agriculture as architecture, transforming erosion-prone cliffs into productive, stable farms. On the high, flat plains around Lake Titicaca, an even more ingenious system flourished, the Waru or Suka colors. Here, the problem was not slope but waterlogged, poorly drained soil and cold air that settled on the ground. The solution was to reverse the logic of the terrace. Farmers dug a network of canals, piling the excavated earth to form wide, raised planting beds surrounded by water. These canals served multiple brilliant functions. They collected and stored water for irrigation during dry periods. More importantly, the water in the canals acted as a thermal battery. It absorbed solar heat during the day and radiated it back at night, creating a protective warmth over the crops on the beds above. The system also improved drainage and fertility, as nutrient-rich sediments from the canals could be periodically added to the beds. This was a self-regulating ecosystem built by hand. The scale of this work required immense coordination, managed through the mitre system, a form of communal labor obligation that was part of the Inca's social fabric. Communities would contribute workers to these vast public projects, from maintaining terraces to expanding the Waru fields. This collective effort bound the society together, turning environmental adaptation into a shared civic duty. One of the most mysterious testaments to this experimental spirit is the site of Moray. Here, deep, natural depressions were shaped into a series of stunning circular terraces, descending like giant stone bowls into the earth. Archaeologists and agronomists believe Moray functioned as a vast agricultural laboratory. Each terrace level experiences a slightly different temperature, sometimes varying by several degrees from top to bottom. Researchers suggest ancient farmers could have used these concentric rings to test which crop varieties thrived at which temperatures, essentially domesticating plants for different altitudes and climates. It was a living research station for food security. Through these systems, the Andean peoples achieved the impossible, cultivating nutritious staples like potatoes and quinoa at altitudes over 3,000 meters, turning marginal lands into breadbaskets. Their legacy is a powerful lesson in working with geometry and physics, using the very shape of the land to manipulate microclimates and defy environmental limits. It makes you wonder if they could farm the mountains. What does that say about our own potential to innovate in the world's most challenging places? Yet for all their ingenuity with water and slope, another ancient culture faced an ultimate test of scarcity, building a metropolis of splendor in a place where it almost never rained at all. The American Southwest is a canvas of red rock and deep blue sky, a place where water is a fleeting dream. Here, the ancestral Pueblones, often called the Anasazi, performed an act of quiet defiance. They did not just survive in this arid expanse, they built a sophisticated society by learning to harvest the sky itself. Their greatest achievement, Chaco Canyon, stands as a haunting monument to this art. This was not a city fed by a river, but one engineered to capture every precious drop of moisture the harsh climate offered. The key to their survival was an intimate, meticulous understanding of water's rare appearances. They built low stone walls called check dams across small washes and gullies. When the infrequent but violent summer rains came, these dams would slow the torrential runoff, allowing water to soak into the soil and creating pockets of fertile ground for planting. They constructed grid gardens, patterns of stones laid on the ground that reduced erosion and trapped moisture around the roots of crops like maize, beans, and squash. More impressive were the intricate systems of channels and reservoirs they carved into the canyon floor. These features were designed to capture and direct not just rainwater, but the precious snowmelt from the surrounding mesa tops, funneling it toward their fields and ceremonial centers. The scale of their planning is revealed in the great houses, like the sprawling D-shaped complex of Pueblo Bonito. Its architecture was not random. Many of its walls and doorways are aligned with precision to mark the solar solstices and the complex 18.6-year cycle of the moon. This suggests their calendar was not just for ceremony, but a critical tool for scheduling planting, harvest, and the all-important water collection rituals. Their cosmology and their engineering were two sides of the same coin, both focused on sustaining life in a precarious balance. Researchers have used tree ring data, a science called dendrochronology, to read the climate history locked in ancient wood. This data paints a picture of a society that thrived during a period of relatively favorable rainfall, but then faced a monumental challenge, a prolonged drought that stretched for decades. The Anasazi response was a masterclass in adaptation. They built more complex water systems like the trincheras, which were extensive rock alignments on hillsides designed to slow sheet runoff, giving water more time to percolate into the earth. They managed sacred springs with great care, understanding these were not just water sources but spiritual lifelines. Yet, despite their profound ingenuity, the great houses of Chaco Canyon were eventually abandoned. This departure raises a profound and timeless question. How do we balance our technological cleverness against the hard limits of an environment? The Anasazi pushed the art of harvesting aridity to its absolute limit, creating a flourishing culture for centuries. But when the climate shifted beyond a certain threshold, even their brilliant systems reached a breaking point. Their story is not one of failure, but a powerful case study in sustainable design under severe constraints. It shows us that resilience is not just about building bigger systems, but about understanding when and how to change course. It forces us to ask, what are the true carrying capacities of the places we call home? Their legacy, written in stone and aligned with the stars, guides us toward a deeper kind of environmental wisdom, one that listens as intently as it builds. The stone canals and terraces were not just feats of engineering, they were acts of faith. For these ancient builders, the line between the physical and the spiritual was invisible. Their deepest environmental knowledge was not stored in manuals, but encoded into the very fabric of their belief systems, etched into the landscape itself as sacred geography. A temple was never just a building. Its placement, its alignment, its very dimensions were a conversation with the cosmos. When you stand at the Temple of Qanat in Egypt, you are walking through a stone model of the universe. Its central axis is precisely oriented toward the winter solstice sunrise. On that day, sunlight would pierce the entire length of the darkened hall, illuminating the inner sanctum and the statue of the god Amun-Ra. This was not a happy coincidence. It was a deliberate engineering marvel, a way of demonstrating that the pharaoh and the priests maintained the cosmic order, Mot, ensuring the sun would return and the Nile would flood. The temple was a machine for maintaining harmony between heaven and earth. This idea of a sacred center, an axis mundi connecting the human world to the divine, is found across cultures. Cities were often laid out as cosmograms, maps of the universe. In Mesopotamia, the ziggurat was a literal stairway to heaven, a man-made mountain linking the city to the gods. In the Andes, the Inca capital of Cusco was designed in the shape of a puma, with the fortress of Sacsayhuaman forming its head, and rivers were channeled to follow sacred lines called sex that radiated out from the temple of the sun, the navel of their world. These were not whimsical designs, they were blueprints for existence, ensuring that every action within the city participated in a larger cosmic balance. This worldview extended to the most mysterious markings of all, the Nazca lines in Peru. From the ground, they are indecipherable scratches, but from the air, vast geometric shapes and animal figures emerge, etched into the desert floor. While their exact purpose is debated, many researchers in archaeoastronomy suggest they were part of a vast ceremonial landscape tied to water and fertility. The lines often point toward water sources in the distant mountains or align with celestial events. Walking these lines during rituals may have been a form of sympathetic magic, a prayer for life giving water to follow the paths humans had drawn. The mythology of a culture often served as its operating system for the natural world. Stories of gods who brought rain or commanded the sun were not mere fantasies. They were frameworks for understanding complex environmental processes. The priests who interpreted these myths were the original data scientists. They were the keepers of the calendar, the observers of the stars, the ones who knew when to plant based on the heliacal rising of a constellation. The Maya are a stunning example. Their long count calendar, famous for its cycles, was intricately tied to their agricultural reality. They tracked the movements of Venus with obsessive precision, believing its cycles influenced rain and warfare. Their elaborate ceremonies were timed to these celestial rhythms, an attempt to align human activity with the forces that governed crop success and community survival. Their pyramids were oriented as observatories with doorways and sightlines capturing the sun on specific, meaningful days. In a very real sense, their spirituality was their science. It provided a holistic model that explained why things happened and prescribed what to do about it. This integration of belief and practicality created a powerful social glue. When everyone shares a cosmology that directly links communal ritual to environmental survival, cooperation is not just encouraged, it is sacred. The shared work of maintaining a temple aligned with the solstice or of walking a ceremonial path for rain reinforced social bonds and centralized the knowledge needed to navigate a challenging world. It makes you wonder, in our modern age where science and spirituality are often seen as separate realms, have we lost something vital? Have we, in our specialization, fractured that holistic understanding of our place within a living, responsive environment? Their approach suggests that the most resilient systems are those where practical knowledge is woven into the very stories a culture tells about itself, where caring for the world is not a chore but a sacred duty. This profound connection to place even influenced the most fundamental choice of all, what they built with. The very stones and bricks of their cities were a silent dialogue with the sky. Long before modern materials science, ancient builders were master chemists and physicists of the everyday, selecting and crafting their surroundings from a deep understanding of local climate. This was engineering at its most intimate, where the wall of a home was not just a barrier, but a living system for managing heat, cold, and moisture. In the scorching deserts of Mesopotamia, the humble mud brick was a technological marvel. Made from the most abundant local material, clay mixed with straw and water, then dried in the sun, these bricks possessed a secret power: high thermal mass. Thick walls built from them would slowly absorb the fierce heat of the day, preventing it from penetrating the interior living spaces. Then, during the cool desert night, that stored heat would gradually release, moderating the indoor temperature. It was a simple, elegant form of passive climate control, turning the building itself into a thermal battery. The straw was not just filler, it acted as a reinforcement, a natural rebar that prevented the bricks from cracking as they dried and expanded, creating a stronger, more durable building block from Earth itself. Move to the high Andes, and the material logic shifts to address a different extreme: intense solar radiation by day and freezing temperatures at night. Here, adobe, a close cousin of mud brick, and locally quarried stone were the materials of choice. An adobe wall, often incredibly thick, performs a similar thermal mass function as the Mesopotamian brick, but with an added benefit. Its slightly porous nature can help regulate interior humidity. The stonework of the Inca, famous for its precise, mortarless fitting, also played a climate role. The stones themselves would absorb daytime heat, and the perfect joins minimized drafts, creating a stable, sheltered microclimate within structures. In the forests of the Maya, another adaptation emerged. To create reliable water storage in their reservoirs, they developed a remarkably effective lime plaster called sascab. By burning limestone and mixing the resulting lime with water and other aggregates, they created a hard, virtually waterproof seal. This technology prevented precious rainwater from seeping away into the porous karst bedrock, turning natural depressions into secure cisterns that could support urban populations through dry seasons. Perhaps one of the most sophisticated integrations of material and climate intelligence comes from ancient Persia in the form of the wind catcher or bajir. These iconic towers, often constructed from specially crafted bricks, rise above buildings in arid regions. They are not solid but have openings facing the prevailing wind. The design cleverly captures even the faintest breeze at a height, funneling it down a shaft and into the living quarters below. But the true genius often lay in coupling this with a Qanat, the underground water channel. As the air descended, it might pass over a small indoor pool or a stream of Qanat water. The evaporation from this water would cool the air significantly before it entered the room, a natural air conditioning system powered entirely by wind and water, with the brick fabric of the tower and building serving as the essential conduit. This vernacular wisdom, the use of local, adapted materials, represents a profound principle of low-tech, high-efficiency design. It required no long-distance transport of resources, just a deep reading of the local environment and its offerings. Modern materials scientists now quantify what these builders understood intuitively: properties like thermal mass, solar reflectance, and moisture permeability. Roman engineers, for instance, perfected a hydraulic concrete that could set underwater, using volcanic ash from the region of Pozzuoli, a material that reacted with seawater to form an incredibly durable bond. This allowed them to build harbors and piers that resisted the relentless pounding of waves, a material solution to a specific coastal climate challenge. The lesson from antiquity is clear: resilience was often baked into the very substance of their world. It asks us to consider what we build with today, and whether our sleek, universal materials have caused us to forget how to listen to, and build in harmony with the specific climate of a place. The true test of any climate adaptation is not just its design, but its maintenance. A canal will silt up, a terrace wall will crumble, and a calendar's predictions will drift without constant collective effort. This reveals the most profound engineering of all, the invisible architecture of society itself. The grand stone calendars and sprawling waterworks were not built by accident, but by human systems meticulously organized to meet environmental demand. At the heart of this was a fundamental truth: managing scarcity or abundance on a civilizational scale required a new kind of social order. One influential theory, proposed by historian Carl Wittfogel, suggested that the very concept of centralized state power may have emerged from the need for large-scale water management, what he termed the hydraulic hypothesis. The argument is compelling. Imagine coordinating the labor of thousands to dredge a 100-mile canal or to redirect a river. That task requires planners, overseers, and a way to feed and house the workforce. It demands record keepers to track water levels and grain stores, and enforcers to ensure the work gets done. This concentration of logistical power, Wittfogel argued, naturally gave rise to a managerial elite, to kings and priests who derived their authority from their role as chief engineers of survival. Whether or not this theory explains the origin of all states, it highlights an undeniable link between environmental challenge and social structure. We see this clearly in the corvée labor systems of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Here, citizens were not slaves in the chattel sense, but they owed a period of annual service to the state. When the Nile flood covered the fields during Qanat, this vast, idle workforce was mobilized for public projects. They built the pyramids, yes, but they also maintained the dikes and dredged the canals that made the kingdom function. This was a society engineered in time, its rhythms of labor locked in step with the rhythms of the river. The surplus grain grown in the fertile mud was stored in state granaries, which then fed these very workers, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of construction and agricultural production. This system required a specialized class, the scribes. Their role was critical. They were the data analysts of antiquity. By meticulously recording the Nile's height on Nilometers, they generated the information that predicted the harvest size, which in turn determined tax quotas and labor allocations. Their clay tablets and papyrus scrolls were the hard drives of the state, containing the environmental and economic data that allowed for planning and resilience. Similarly, guilds of craftsmen, those who knew how to fit stones without mortar or cast perfect bronze sluice gates, became custodians of essential technologies. Their knowledge, passed from master to apprentice, was a form of social infrastructure as vital as any aqueduct. Not all adaptations centralized power in this way. Many indigenous societies developed sophisticated communal systems for managing shared resources. Think of the intricate water-sharing customs of desert tribes, or the collective decision-making of village councils that determined when to plant based on shared observation of natural signs. These were decentralized, flexible structures built on mutual obligation and deep local knowledge. The Inca Empire offers a fascinating hybrid model, the Mita system. This was a rotational labor tax where communities across the empire contributed workers for set periods to state projects, from building terraces and roads to maintaining storehouses. In return, the state provided security, organized feasts, and redistributed goods from different ecological zones. It was a vast, reciprocal network that bound a mountainous empire together by ensuring critical climate adaptation infrastructure was consistently maintained. The Mita was the social engine that kept the physical machinery of the Andes running. This forces us to confront a modern parallel. We face a planetary-scale environmental challenge, one that demands maintenance and transformation of our own infrastructure on an unprecedented scale. What societal structures, what new forms of cooperation and governance do we need to build now? The lesson from antiquity is that our social organization is not separate from our physical solutions. It is the foundation that makes them possible. Resilience was and is a collective project, and at the very core of that project, fueling every worker and scribe, was a quiet revolution happening in the earth, a revolution of seeds and soil that turned adaptation into abundance. The most resilient infrastructure they built was not made of stone but of life itself. Long before the first irrigation canal was dug, ancient farmers performed a quiet, revolutionary act of engineering, one that unfolded not over seasons but over centuries. They began to redesign the very plants they depended on. This was the original genetic modification, achieved through patient observation and selective breeding, transforming wild, unpredictable grasses and tubers into the reliable staples that would feed empires. The work of paleoethnobotanists, scientists who study ancient plant remains, allows us to read this history from fragments of charred seeds and pollen grains trapped in millennia-old mud. Their findings reveal a monumental, collaborative project conducted by countless generations of nameless agriculturalists. Take the story of wheat. Its wild ancestor, a grass called einkorn, had seed heads that shattered easily, scattering its grains to the wind with a touch. Early harvesters would naturally collect the seeds from plants that held on a little tighter, that did not shatter. Over time, by saving and replanting those seeds, they unconsciously selected for a genetic mutation that produced a tougher rachis, the stem that holds the grain. The plant now relied on humans to spread its seeds, and humans gained a dependable harvest. This was the birth of domestication, a mutual pact between species. But the selection did not stop there. In the arid margins of the Fertile Crescent, farmers favored plants that ripened earlier, beating the summer drought. In flood-prone areas, they chose varieties that could tolerate having their roots submerged. They were not just growing food, they were programming resilience directly into their crops, tailoring them to the specific climatic challenges of their homeland. This principle of localized adaptation reached breathtaking sophistication in the terraced mountains of the Andes. Here, farmers did not develop one potato, they engineered thousands. By selectively propagating tubers from plants that thrived in specific microclimates, resistant to particular blights or frosts, they created a dazzling genetic library. There were potatoes that grew in rocky, high-altitude soils, potatoes that flourished in lower, warmer valleys, potatoes with different textures and storage qualities. This incredible diversity was their ultimate insurance policy. If one variety failed due to a late frost or an unusual pest, dozens of others would likely succeed. Their agricultural strategy mirrored their engineered landscape. It was all about spreading risk. This wisdom of diversity extended to how they planted. Across the ancient world, from the milpa gardens of Mesoamerica to the village plots of early China, farmers practiced polyculture. They grew maize, beans, and squash together in the same field. The maize stalk provided a pole for the beans to climb. The beans fixed nitrogen in the soil to feed the maize, and the broad squash leaves shaded the ground, suppressing weeds and retaining moisture. This was not just efficient use of space, it was a symbiotic ecosystem that built soil health, reduced pest outbreaks, and guaranteed that if one crop had a poor year, the others could compensate. In Asia, the domestication of rice followed a similar path of brilliant specialization. Farmers developed distinct varieties for dramatically different water regimes, lowland paddies that thrived in deep, standing water, and upland strains that could grow with only rainfall. This allowed communities to cultivate every available niche, from river deltas to hillsides, maximizing their food security from a single, versatile grass. Contrast this ancient mosaic with the vast, uniform fields of modern monoculture. Our global food system now rests on a perilously narrow genetic foundation, with a handful of high-yielding varieties dominating entire continents. This efficiency comes with a profound vulnerability. A single new disease or a shifting climate pattern can threaten an entire harvest on a continental scale. The old way asked a different question, not how to maximize yield in a perfect year, but how to ensure there is always something to harvest, no matter what the season brings. That biological foundation, that deep library of life crafted by countless hands over thousands of years, was the true bedrock of civilization. It turned the uncertainty of the climate into a manageable portfolio of living options. With their food supply secured through this living technology, these societies could then turn their collective attention to a grander, more visible ambition: the construction of monumental centers that would proclaim their harmony with the cosmos to the world. But the mastery of seeds and soil was only half the equation. In landscapes where the sky offered little, civilizations learned to reach not up but down into the very bones of the earth. They discovered that water was not just on the surface, but moving in secret rivers beneath their feet. From this understanding arose one of the most elegant and enduring feats of ancient engineering, a technology so sustainable it still quenches thirst today. This is the story of the Qanat. Imagine a line of craters marching across a barren plain, leading from a distant mountain foothill to a lush green orchard in the desert. This is the visible signature of a Qanat, a gravity-fed underground aqueduct that is nothing short of hydrological genius. The system begins at the head, a mother well dug deep into the water table at the base of a mountain, where rainfall and snowmelt naturally percolate and collect. From there, skilled diggers, known as mukanis, would begin carving a gently sloping tunnel, just large enough for a person to crawl through, back toward the settlement and farmland. The slope was the critical calculation, falling only a meter or two for every kilometer of length, a gradient so slight it allowed water to flow without eroding the tunnel, yet steep enough to keep it moving. But how did they dig a straight, sloped tunnel for miles without modern surveying tools? The answer lies in those mysterious craters, the vertical access shafts. Dug at intervals of 20 to 30 meters, these shafts served a triple purpose. They provided ventilation for the diggers far below, they were used to lift out excavated soil, and most brilliantly, they acted as surveying points. Builders could drop a plumb line down each shaft to ensure the tunnel below maintained its precise, gentle descent. It was a masterpiece of applied geometry and sheer human perseverance. The water that finally emerged at the surface outlet, the Majar, was cool, clean, and protected from the blistering sun that would evaporate an open canal in hours. A single Qanat could flow for centuries, a lifeline carved in stone and earth. This technology was not confined to Persia. You find its siblings across the arid world, the Qattara of Morocco winding through palm groves, the Fagara of the Sahara sustaining remote oases. Each was a testament to a shared hydrological wisdom, a way of asking the land for its hidden bounty without draining it dry. The social system around them was equally ingenious. Water shares were often divided by time, with a community's access dictated by a water clock or a trusted manager, ensuring fair distribution. Maintaining the tunnels was a communal duty, binding people together around their most precious resource. Far to the east, in the arid regions of India, another breathtaking solution rose from the ground, not as a hidden tunnel, but as an inverted temple. These are the stepwells or baolis. While a Qanat brings water to you, a stepwell invites you down to the water. During the torrential monsoon, these colossal structures would capture runoff, channeling it into a deep, central reservoir. But a stepwell is so much more than a hole in the ground. It is a cascading staircase of architectural splendor, with tier upon tier of carved pillars, pavilions, and shaded galleries descending into the cool, dark earth. As the water level receded during the long dry season, the steps would be exposed, allowing people to descend further and further to reach it. The Chand Baori in Rajasthan is a staggering example. a geometric wonder of 3,500 narrow steps cascading down 13 stories into a mesmerizing, reflective pool. These were vibrant social spaces where the act of drawing water blended with community gathering, ritual, and respite from the heat. Critically, their design also recharged the local groundwater, acting as a giant percolation tank that replenished the aquifer for surrounding wells. Hydraulic engineers today marvel at the precision of these systems, built with simple tools and profound observation. They represent a philosophy of extraction that is inherently sustainable. A Qanat only draws water at the rate the aquifer naturally recharges, preventing depletion. A Stepwell stores seasonal surplus and actively improves the water table. In our modern era of powerful pumps that can drain an aquifer in a generation, these ancient methods whisper a crucial question. What if our goal is not to conquer a water source, but to converse with it, to design systems that work with the hydrologic cycle rather than aggressively mining it? They teach us that resilience can be quiet, patient, and built into the landscape itself, a lesson flowing from the deep past as vital now as the water it carried. The true wealth of their world lay not in gold, but in the dark, crumbly earth beneath their feet. While grand monuments rose to the sky, a quieter, more vital revolution was happening at ground level, a deep understanding of soil as a living system to be nurtured, not just mined. This was the ultimate climate engineering, for without fertile soil, all the canals and calendars in the world could not sustain a civilization. They became masters of Earth itself, developing techniques that not only fed their generations but actively healed the land. Beyond the structural genius of terracing, which prevented erosion, they tackled the deeper challenge of nutrient depletion. How do you farm the same plot year after year, century after century, without exhausting it? The answers were as diverse as the landscapes they inhabited. In the highlands of the Andes and the valleys of China, farmers practiced meticulous nutrient cycling. They collected animal manure and human waste, composting it with plant matter to create a rich, balanced fertilizer that returned essential elements to the earth. They understood the value of legumes, plants like beans and lentils, which have a miraculous ability to pull nitrogen from the air and fix it in the soil through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in their root nodules. By planting these crops in rotation with grains, they naturally recharged the soil's fertility, a process we now call green manuring. Perhaps the most astonishing example of ancient soil science comes from the Amazon rainforest, a place long thought to be incapable of supporting large-scale agriculture. Yet archaeologists have discovered vast patches of incredibly rich, dark soil known as Terra Preta, or black earth. This was not a natural occurrence, but a human-made technology. Indigenous peoples created it over centuries by slowly incorporating charcoal, known today as biochar, along with food waste, pottery shards, and manure into the otherwise poor tropical soil. The charcoal acted like a sponge, locking in nutrients and moisture, and providing a perfect habitat for beneficial microbes. The result was a self-regenerating, hyper-fertile soil that remains productive to this day, a stunning legacy of active, long-term environmental management. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs faced a lack of arable land by building it from the bottom up. In the shallow lakes of the Valley of Mexico, they constructed the chinampas, often called floating gardens. They wove giant reed mats, piled them with nutrient-rich lake mud and decaying vegetation, and anchored them with willow trees. These artificial islands became unbelievably productive plots, with the canal water keeping the roots constantly moist and the decaying organic matter providing continuous fertilizer. It was a closed-loop system of waste and growth, producing multiple harvests each year. Meanwhile, Roman agricultural writers like Cotto and Columella documented sophisticated crop rotation schedules, alternating wheat with nitrogen-fixing beans or letting fields lie fallow to recover. They also pioneered the use of marl, a clay rich in minerals, to amend and improve soil structure. In China, farmers along the Yellow River harnessed the river's own power for soil renewal. They channeled the nutrient-laden silt from the river's annual floods onto their fields, a practice that systematically rebuilt topsoil washed away by the very same waters. Modern soil scientists studying these ancient methods are uncovering their profound ecological wisdom. Techniques like biochar addition are now recognized as powerful tools for carbon sequestration, pulling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locking it safely in the soil for millennia. These practices also dramatically improve water retention, making farms more resilient to drought. Compare this to the trajectory of modern industrial agriculture, which often relies on extracting nutrients from the soil to feed crops, leading to widespread degradation and loss of precious topsoil. The ancient approach was fundamentally additive and regenerative. Look at the rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras or the mountainous farms of Yemen, still fertile after thousands of years of continuous use. Their enduring productivity is no accident. It is the result of a philosophy that viewed soil as a capital to be invested in, not a resource to be spent. Today, under names like regenerative agriculture and carbon farming, we are in many ways rediscovering these ancient principles. It prompts a humbling realization that some of the most advanced climate solutions we seek for our future are rooted in a very deep past, in the simple, profound act of caring for the ground we stand on. The city was not just a collection of buildings, it was a living, breathing organism engineered for survival. Every street, every courtyard, every wall was a conscious climatic intervention, a tool to sculpt the raw forces of nature into an environment fit for human life. This was urban planning as microclimate engineering long before the term existed. Walk through the old quarters of a medieval Arab city, and you are entering a machine for creating shade and capturing breeze. The streets are deliberately narrow and winding, not from poor planning but by brilliant design. These shaded canyons of stone and plaster create a profound cooling effect as the high walls block the intense midday sun and radiate stored coolness from the night before. The irregular layout also breaks the force of dust-laden desert winds while funneling any gentle breeze downward into the public spaces. Courtyards at the heart of homes served as private climate engines. Often featuring a central fountain or a small pool, they leveraged evaporative cooling. As water evaporated into the hot, dry air, it would pull heat from the surrounding space, creating a refreshing oasis. Open rooms faced inward toward this cool, shaded core, with high ceilings that allowed hot air to rise and escape. Above it all, the iconic wind-catcher towers, the badgers, stood as sentinels, scooping up the slightest upper-level breeze and directing it down into the living quarters, sometimes across damp cloths or water channels to amplify the chill. This was a complete, integrated system for thermal comfort, built from local materials and timeless physics. Across the world in ancient China, urban and architectural planning followed the principles of feng shui, which translates as wind and water. This was not mere superstition, but a sophisticated system of environmental placement. A key rule was the orientation of buildings to maximize southern exposure. In the cold northern winters, a south-facing structure would capture the low-angled sunlight, passively heating its interior. Thick earthen walls on the north side would block the harsh winter winds, while courtyards were arranged to promote air circulation during the stifling summer heat. The placement of a city itself, nestled against protective mountains with access to flowing water, was dictated by this holistic understanding of climatic advantage. We see this conscious design in the very bones of ancient cities. The Indus Valley's Mohenjo-Daro, with its orderly grid of streets, was laid out primarily for efficient drainage, a direct response to the monsoon climate. In parts of West Africa, traditional compounds were built in circular layouts with thatched roofs that extended low to the ground. This rounded shape presented no hard corner for the wind to catch, effectively deflecting strong gusts and minimizing structural stress during storms. In the flood-prone river deltas and coastlines of Southeast Asia, communities built their homes on sturdy wooden stilts. This elevated design served multiple climate functions. It raised living spaces above seasonal floodwaters, allowed cooling air to circulate underneath, and provided shade and sheltered workspace at ground level. Even the social organization of a city reflected climate logic. Markets were often placed near main gates or water sources, where goods and people could move easily. Temples and administrative buildings requiring large gatherings might be situated to catch prevailing breezes for comfort. Residential districts were often nestled in areas with reliable water access or protective topography. Compare this deeply embedded intelligence to the sprawling, car-dependent suburbs of many modern cities. Wide asphalt streets and vast parking lots create urban heat islands, absorbing and radiating intense heat. Uniform, box-like buildings often ignore solar orientation, requiring massive energy inputs for heating and cooling. Stormwater management is an afterthought, channeled into concrete culverts rather than absorbed by green spaces. We have, in many ways, engineered the comfort out of our habitats, then used technology to brute force it back in. The ancient city was a grand project in collective well-being, where the very shape of the community was a dialogue with the sky, the wind, and the water. This meticulous orchestration of space was mirrored by an equally precise orchestration of time, for knowing when to act was just as critical as knowing where to build. The rhythm of the city was governed by a deeper, invisible pulse, the relentless turning of the seasons. To synchronize human activity with this celestial clock, ancient societies engineered perhaps their most vital tool, not from stone or water, but from pure observation. They built calendars. These were not mere date keepers. They were the essential operating software for an entire civilization. Complex programs designed to predict the future of the harvest, the flood, and the very stability of the community. The fundamental problem they all faced was a mismatch in nature. The moon's cycle, roughly 29.5 days, gives us months. The Earth's journey around the sun, about 365.25 days, gives us the year and the seasons. But 12 lunar months fall about 11 days short of a solar year. If you just follow the moon, your planting seasons would drift through the year, arriving in winter after a few decades. To keep spring festivals aligned with spring and harvest times with autumn, they had to invent a fix, a way to weave the lunar and solar cycles together. The Maya in Mesoamerica achieved a staggering level of precision. Their long count calendar was just one part of an interlocking system. They also maintained a sacred 260-day calendar, a solar year of 365 days, and meticulously tracked the 584-day cycle of Venus. Priests and astronomers used these overlapping cycles to schedule everything from agricultural work to ceremonies, believing celestial movements directly influenced earthly events. Their calculations, achieved without telescopes, were so accurate that their solar year was more precise than the calendar used in Europe at the time of first contact. In Egypt, the solution was elegantly simple and tied directly to survival. They observed that the heliacal rising of Sirius, the flooding of the Nile, and the solar year all coincided. They created a civil calendar of exactly 365 days, divided into 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 extra days at year's end. While it slowly drifted against the true solar year, losing about 1 day every 4 years, its consistency made it a powerful administrative tool for millennia, dictating the rhythm of labor, taxation, and religious observance. China developed a sophisticated lunisolar calendar where months were lunar, but an extra month was inserted or intercalated every few years to resynchronize with the sun. The decision of when to add this intercalary month was a matter of state importance, requiring precise astronomical observation. Emperors derived their mandate from heaven, and a correctly maintained calendar was proof they upheld cosmic order. The Roman Julian reform, initiated by Julius Caesar, tackled the drift head-on by adopting a solar-based system with a leap year, a solution that forms the backbone of our calendar today. These were not abstract mathematical exercises. A calendar's primary function was profoundly practical. It told farmers when to prepare the fields, when to sow the precious seeds, and when to gather the harvest. It told priests when to perform the rituals to call the rain or thank the sun. It told tax collectors when the grain would be in the storehouses. It orchestrated the entire annual cycle of work, celebration, and obligation. To mark these critical dates on the ground, they used horizon astronomy. Structures like Stonehenge or the Sun Dagger at Chaco Canyon acted as giant stone calendars, where sunlight would pierce a specific slot or illuminate a spiral only on the solstice or equinox, providing a communal, undeniable signal that the time had come. The seasonal rituals tied to this calendar were not just superstition, they were a form of practical community mobilization. A rain dance before the monsoon was a collective act of focus and preparation, psychologically readying the community for the coming labor and reinforcing social bonds. A harvest festival after the hard work of gathering crops served to redistribute food, celebrate success, and strengthen communal ties before the leaner winter months. These ceremonies translated the abstract date on a calendar into embodied, shared experience, ensuring everyone was literally on the same page. In our digital age, time has become a uniform, global grid, disconnected from local sunrise or soil temperature. We schedule our lives by pixels on a screen, often unaware of the moon's phase or the position of the sun in the sky. This disconnection from natural cycles begs a profound question. If we no longer perceive time as a rhythm woven into the fabric of our local environment, how can we truly understand the pace and urgency of environmental change? Their mastery of time was the ultimate tool for anticipation, turning the anxiety of the unknown into the confidence of a plan. It was a knowledge system so vital that its preservation became the sacred duty of priests, scribes, and storytellers, ensuring the survival blueprint was never lost. This vast library of environmental intelligence was utterly useless if it was forgotten. The true longevity of a civilization depended not just on what it knew, but on how it remembered. Preserving this hard-won wisdom across centuries required its own ingenious engineering, turning knowledge into something durable, memorable, and sacred. The first and most universal system was the human voice itself. Oral traditions were not casual storytelling, they were highly structured, rhythmic, and formulaic memory palaces. Elders and shamans, the living hard drives of their communities, would encode critical information into myths, songs, and epic poems. A story about a hero's journey might secretly map a safe migration route, noting landmarks and water sources. A song about the moon goddess could embed the precise lunar phases for planting a specific seed. The rhythm and repetition made the information unforgettable, allowing it to be passed flawlessly from one generation to the next without a single written word. This was knowledge woven into the fabric of identity itself. For specialized, hands-on skills, the master-apprentice model became the gold standard. A young stonemason in Egypt did not learn from a textbook, but by watching, listening, and doing alongside a master for years. The precise angle for fitting a pyramid block, the mix for a waterproof mortar, the feel of the right stone, this tactile, experiential knowledge was transferred through shared labor. Guilds of builders, potters, and metalworkers became custodians of this technical lore, protecting it as a valuable trade secret that ensured their community's survival and their own status. When writing emerged, it became the ultimate tool for preservation, but it was often reserved for the most vital, complex data. In Mesopotamia, scribes pressed cuneiform into clay tablets to record celestial omens and agricultural manuals. One famous series of tablets, known as Mul.Apin, is essentially an astronomical compendium. It lists stars, tracks planetary movements, and provides a farming almanac all in one, creating a permanent reference guide for priests and planners. Centuries later and across the world, the Maya created beautiful screen-fold books from bark paper known as codices. The Dresden Codex contains incredibly precise Venus tables, charting the planet's cycles over decades. This wasn't just astronomy for its own sake. It was a practical tool for scheduling rituals believed to influence rain and agricultural success. The book itself was a sacred object, a physical vessel for cosmic order. They also encoded knowledge directly into the landscape on a monumental scale. The Nazca lines, those vast geoglyphs in Peru, may have served as a permanent ceremonial map and teaching tool. Walking the lines during rituals could have been a way of physically imparting knowledge about water sources and celestial pathways to each new generation. Stone circles like Stonehenge or the medicine wheels of North America acted as enormous, immutable calendars and teaching aids, their alignment serving as a perpetual lesson in the relationship between earth and sky. Mythology itself was a powerful storage device. The vivid tale of the Egyptian god Osiris, whose death and rebirth mirrored the Nile's flood cycle, taught an entire people about the concepts of renewal, fertility, and the predictable rhythm of life and death. The story carried the practical truth within a memorable, emotional narrative. The fragility of this entire system is tragically illustrated by the classic Maya collapse. As social structures fractured under pressure from prolonged drought and conflict, the specialized class of scribes and astronomers who maintained the codices and calendars dispersed. The intricate knowledge of water management, seasonal cycles, and celestial timing was gradually lost, severing the cultural memory that had sustained their cities for centuries. This loss turned a crisis into a catastrophe, making recovery far more difficult. Their story asks us a direct and unsettling question. In our own digital age where data is abundant but often superficial, what essential wisdom are we failing to transmit? We have vast stores of climate data, but have we lost the communal stories and hands-on skills that teach us how to live within our local environment? We preserve information on servers that may become obsolete in decades, while they carved theirs into stone and song meant to last for millennia. The safeguarding of environmental know-how was the final, crucial piece of their resilience, the thread that stitched one generation's solution into the enduring tapestry of a culture. It ensured that a clever adaptation did not die with its inventor, but became a lasting legacy. And as we near the end of their story, we must turn this mirror back on ourselves to see what their ancient blueprints reveal about our own precarious moment in time. A civilization's strength was measured not just by its granaries, but by the length of its friendships. When the rains failed in one valley, the true test of ingenuity was not only in local water storage, but in the ability to call upon a neighbor. This is where the story of climate adaptation expands beyond engineering and into the realm of diplomacy and daring through vast intercontinental trade networks. These routes were far more than commercial ventures. They were sophisticated climate risk management systems, creating a safety net woven across thousands of miles. No single ecology could provide everything forever. A drought in the highlands might wither potato crops, while a flood in the lowlands could ruin cotton harvests. Trade turned these individual vulnerabilities into collective strength. By establishing exchange routes, a civilization could specialize in what its environment did best and trade its surplus for what it lacked. The Inca Empire mastered this principle through the Quhapac-Ñan, the magnificent royal road that stretched over 25,000 miles through mountains and deserts. Runners called chasquis moved not just messages but goods from the coast to the highlands. Fish and seaweed from the Pacific could be traded for freeze-dried potatoes and wool from the Andes, and tropical fruits from the eastern foothills. This system, managed by the state, allowed the empire to redistribute food from areas of plenty to areas of scarcity, smoothing out local climate shocks and preventing regional hardship from escalating into crisis. It was a literal network of resilience, with storehouses placed a day's journey apart along the route, constantly stocked against future need. Half a world away, the Silk Road performed a similar function on a continental scale. It was not a single road, but a web of pathways connecting the ecological zones of Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Caravans carried more than silk and spices. They carried life-saving knowledge and biological innovation. Drought-resistant millet varieties from arid Central Asia spread into China, offering farmers a new tool against unreliable rainfall. Metallurgical techniques for forging stronger iron traveled alongside the finished blades, allowing different cultures to improve their tools for agriculture and construction. The exchange was a living library of adaptation strategies in motion. Perhaps the most striking example of trade as a climate buffer was the Roman grain dole. The city of Rome, with its enormous population, could not feed itself from the surrounding Italian countryside. Its stability depended on a regular, massive influx of grain shipped from the fertile floodplains of Egypt and North Africa. When the Tiber Valley had a poor harvest, the wheat from Alexandria kept the city fed and the populace calm. This system turned the entire Mediterranean into Rome's breadbasket, diversifying its food sources across different climate zones to mitigate the risk of a universal crop failure. The Phoenicians, master sailors of the ancient world, took this concept of diversification to its logical extreme. They did not just trade with existing ports, they established permanent colonies across the Mediterranean, from Carthage in North Africa to settlements in Spain and Sicily. Scholars note this can be seen as a deliberate strategy of climatic risk distribution. If a drought or conflict disrupted trade in one region, the wider Phoenician network could shift its resources and routes, drawing on the production of its far-flung communities. Their prosperity was not anchored to one shore, but was as mobile and adaptable as their famous ships. These networks did more than move goods, they moved people and ideas. A merchant traveling the monsoon routes of the Indian Ocean might bring not only pepper, but also techniques for building stepwells or managing seasonal winds. The trade in salt, essential for preserving food, was itself a form of climate adaptation, allowing societies to store nutrition beyond the harvest season. This interconnectedness created a form of collaborative resilience. A local innovation, like a new terracing method or a hardier seed, could become a regional asset. The failure of one community did not have to be an endpoint. It could be met with support from a trading partner, reinforcing social bonds and mutual dependence. Today, we live in a world connected by global supply chains far more extensive than the Silk Road, yet this system often feels fragile, optimized for efficiency rather than resilience. When a single region faces a climate-driven disaster, the ripple effects can halt production continents away. The ancient model asks us a difficult but vital question. Can we redesign our global connections not just for cheapness and speed, but for equitable stability? Can our trade networks become true buffers again, spreading risk and sharing solutions so that no community is an island in the face of a changing world? Their legacy suggests that the most durable adaptations are those built on cooperation, recognizing that our fates are woven together by the very threads of exchange. Yet even the most ingenious networks can fray when the land itself grows silent. Far out in the vast Pacific, on one of the most isolated islands on Earth, a society faced the ultimate test of its own ingenuity. The story of Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, stands as a haunting counterpoint, a powerful lesson written in fallen stone. For too long, it has been told as a simple parable of ecological ruin, a people who foolishly cut down their last tree. But the truth, as uncovered by archaeologists and paleoecologists, is far more complex and far more instructive. It is a story of brilliant adaptation meeting its limits, a slow unraveling where the very symbols of their success may have blinded them to the changing world. The Polynesian settlers who reached those shores around 1200 years ago were masters of oceanic survival. They found a landscape quite different from today, with forests of now extinct giant palms. They adapted with skill, developing a remarkable technique called lithic mulching. They broke volcanic rock and spread it across garden plots. These stone fragments acted as a protective blanket, reducing evaporation in the windy climate, moderating soil temperature, and suppressing weeds. It was a clever, sustainable innovation that turned marginal soil into productive gardens for their staple crops like sweet potato and taro. For centuries, their society flourished. But a cascade of pressures began to build. The Polynesian rat, an unintentional stowaway on their voyaging canoes, found no natural predators on the island. It multiplied rapidly, and evidence suggests it played a major role in the deforestation, gnawing on palm nuts and preventing the forests from regenerating. This loss of trees had profound consequences. Without wood, building new seagoing canoes for deep water fishing became impossible, cutting off a vital protein source. Erosion increased, washing away precious topsoil. Some researchers also point to evidence of a prolonged drier period, a climatic shift that would have stressed their agricultural systems further. It was a perfect storm of ecological change. In the midst of this, their society reached a breathtaking cultural peak, the era of the Moray. The carving, transport, and erection of these monumental statues was a staggering engineering and social feat. It required a highly organized society with specialized craftsmen and a large labor force. This is where a critical question emerges. Did the immense spiritual and social focus on the Moray, the consumption of resources and labor for these grand projects, divert essential energy away from the day-to-day practices needed to sustain their fragile ecosystem? Some experts theorize that as resources dwindled, competition between clans may have intensified, with the erection of ever larger statues becoming a display of power and a plea to the ancestors for favor, even as the foundation of their world was eroding. The final chapters are not of a sudden collapse, but of a painful transformation and remarkable resilience. As the old system became unsustainable, their society did not simply vanish. It changed. Oral histories and archaeological evidence point to a dramatic cultural shift. The cult of the ancestor statues, the Moai, was gradually abandoned. In its place arose the birdman cult, a new tradition focused on an annual competition to retrieve the first sooty-tern egg from a treacherous offshore islet. This was not a story of giving up, but of adapting their beliefs and social structure to a new, stark reality. It represented a move from monument building to a ritual that emphasized individual prowess and a direct connection to a still abundant resource, the seabirds. So where is the line between adaptive engineering and overexploitation? For the people of Rapa Nui, their lithic mulching was brilliant adaptation. Their statue building was a magnificent expression of social cohesion and spiritual belief. But in a closed system with no escape valve, with introduced species and a shifting climate, those very successes may have locked them into a path that became difficult to alter. The early warning signs, the thinning forests, the declining seabird populations, the need to garden farther inland, were likely visible for generations. The lesson is not one of stupidity, but of the immense challenge of changing course when a society's identity, its economy, and its spiritual life are deeply invested in the status quo. Their story echoes forward to us with quiet urgency. It asks what monuments we are building today and what vital systems we might be overlooking in the process. It reminds us that resilience is not a one-time achievement, but a constant recalibration, a willingness to listen to the land even when it whispers, and to have the courage to transform our most cherished traditions before the whispers become shouts. The story of Rapa Nui is a powerful lesson in limits, but it is not the only possible ending. Across the world, another civilization faced a similar monsoon climate and turned it into a source of spectacular, enduring strength. The Khmer Empire did not just survive its environment, it sculpted a masterpiece from water and stone, creating what may have been the world's most extensive pre-industrial hydraulic city. At its heart was Angkor, not merely a collection of temples but a vast, engineered hydro-metropolis. For centuries, this intricate system turned the challenge of seasonal deluge and drought into the very engine of an empire. The genius of Angkor remained partially hidden until modern eyes could see through the dense jungle canopy. The advent of LiDAR technology, a form of aerial laser scanning, peeled back the layers of vegetation to reveal a breathtaking truth. The famous temples like Angkor Wat were just the glittering peaks of a colossal, submerged landscape. Archaeologists mapped a sprawling grid of canals, meticulously laid out embankments, and enormous reservoirs called barrays, all interconnected in a deliberate, city-wide design. This was not a haphazard collection of ponds, but a conscious, continent-sized machine for managing water. The system had one primary, brilliant function: to capture the furious abundance of the annual monsoon and store it for the long, rainless dry season. Canals channeled floodwaters away from urban areas and into the massive reservoirs. The West Baray alone is an artificial lake stretching 8 kilometers long and 2.2 kilometers wide, holding over 50 million cubic meters of water. This stored water was then released through a network of channels during the dry months, irrigating vast rice paddies that could support a population historians estimate in the hundreds of thousands. The rice agriculture it enabled was not subsistence farming, but intensive, triple cropping that produced the immense agricultural surplus needed to feed laborers, artisans, soldiers, and the royal court. This food security was the true foundation of Khmer power and artistic achievement. But the system was far more than just practical. Water held a profound symbolic meaning in the Hindu-Buddhist cosmology of the Khmer kings. The barrays were designed as representations of the cosmic ocean, with the central temple mountain, like Angkor Wat itself, symbolizing the mythical Mount Meru, home of the gods. The elaborate moats surrounding the temples were not just for defense, they were sacred boundaries, reflecting the temple's perfection in their still waters and creating a microcosm of the ordered universe. This fusion of spiritual vision and hydrological engineering meant that maintaining the water system was a sacred duty, a way of upholding cosmic order and demonstrating the king's divine mandate. The engineering details reveal a sophisticated understanding of hydrology. Temple moats were not stagnant, but part of the living water network, with inlet and outlet channels ensuring circulation. Researchers have identified sophisticated overflow systems and spillways built into the baray embankments, designed to safely release excess water during unusually heavy floods and prevent catastrophic breaches. This capacity to buffer against variable rainfall, to smooth out the extremes of feast and famine, demonstrates an incredibly high level of long-term adaptive capacity. It allowed Khmer society to flourish for over 5 centuries. So why did this magnificent system eventually falter? The answer lies in a slow convergence of pressures. Paleoclimate data from tree rings suggests the region experienced several severe megadroughts in the 14th and 15th centuries, periods where even the vast barrays may have struggled to maintain their supply. At the same time, the intricate canal network would have been constantly threatened by siltation from the deforested uplands, a maintenance burden that may have become overwhelming as the empire's central power and resources waned. Some experts suggest the very scale and complexity of the system may have made it vulnerable, a masterpiece that required a strong, centralized state to maintain its delicate balance. When climatic extremes pushed against the edges of its design and the social will to maintain it fractured, the hydro-metropolis began to quietly unravel. Anka's legacy, therefore, is a double-edged sword. It stands as a breathtaking testament to the scale of human ambition when engineering is woven into the very identity of a civilization. It shows that resilience can be built on a monumental scale, turning environmental constraints into a source of power and beauty that echoes for 1,000 years. Yet its gradual transformation also whispers a caution that even the most brilliant systems exist within a dynamic relationship with a changing climate and a committed society. It prompts us to look at our own vast modern infrastructures and ask, what are the barriers of our age and what will it take to maintain them for the centuries to come? A brilliant invention in one mountain valley could, over centuries, rewrite the destiny of a desert a continent away. The journey of these ideas is a story of human connection, showing that innovation was rarely a solitary spark, but often a flame passed from hand to hand across vast distances. Consider the Qanat, that underground river of Persian genius. Its basic principle did not stay confined. As knowledge and people moved, so did the technology. Through the expansion of empires and the footsteps of traders, the Qanat traveled west across North Africa, where it became the Terra, sustaining oasis communities in Morocco. It spread east along the Silk Road, appearing in the arid stretches of Central Asia. In a remarkable twist of colonial exchange, Spanish engineers, having observed similar systems during their occupation of the Iberian Peninsula, introduced the concept to the Americas, where it influenced water management in places like Mexico and Chile. This was not a simple copy and paste operation. Each culture adapted the core idea to its own geology and social structure, proving that a successful transfer required local reinvention. Parallel to this movement of water was a movement of earth. The fundamental solution of terracing steep slopes for agriculture emerged in strikingly similar forms across the globe. From the breathtaking rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras and the mountain farms of Yemen to the sophisticated platforms of the Inca and the ancient hillside vineyards of the Mediterranean, the same answer was found for the same problem. Archaeologists and historians debate whether this represents diffusion, where the concept slowly spread from a single point of origin, or parallel innovation, where separate cultures, faced with the same relentless force of gravity on their crops, independently arrived at the same elegant conclusion. The truth likely holds some of both. A traveler seeing a terraced hillside in one kingdom might carry the visual idea home, sparking local experimentation. Yet the sheer number of independent appearances suggests a deeper truth, that human ingenuity, when pressed by a universal environmental challenge, often converges on a narrow set of effective solutions. This transfer of technology was never guaranteed success. The most delicate part of the process was adaptation. A crop variety perfectly tuned to the monsoon patterns of Mesoamerica would falter in the different day length and soil of a northern valley. An architectural style like the wind catcher, perfect for capturing dry desert breezes, would be less effective in a humid coastal climate. Successful diffusion required more than just moving an object. It required translating a principle. When the Spanish brought Old World crops to the Andes, it was the indigenous farmers, with their deep understanding of microclimates honed at places like Moray, who figured out which European plants could thrive at which altitudes, effectively domesticating them a second time. This highlights a critical point. The knowledge of how to use a technology is often more valuable than the tool itself. The Silk Road and other trade networks were the information superhighways of antiquity, carrying not just silks and spices, but packets of environmental wisdom. A merchant might convey the idea of a frost-resistant barley from the high steppes, or a method for storing grain in underground pits to a community facing new droughts. Perhaps the most profound diffusions were entire agricultural systems. The Three Sisters complex of maize, beans, and squash, developed in Mesoamerica, traveled northward over generations, transforming the foodways and enabling the growth of societies across North America. This was a complete, symbiotic package of ecological knowledge. Similarly, the rice farming techniques of China, with their intricate water management, spread across Southeast Asia, adapting to river deltas and rain-fed highlands alike. In our modern, hyper-connected world, we can share a satellite image of a deforestation or a schematic for a solar panel in seconds. We have a global library of climate solutions at our fingertips. Yet this raises a poignant question. Are we truly better at the hard work of diffusion, the slow, careful process of local adaptation? We can send the blueprint anywhere, but the ancient lesson remains. A solution only takes root when it is carefully tended by people who understand the specific soil, water, and spirit of a place. Their interconnected story reminds us that no culture has ever had to invent everything from scratch, and that our collective resilience has always been a patchwork quilt of shared genius, stitched together across mountains and millennia. The grand reservoirs and stone calendars tell only part of the story. Behind every monumental achievement was a deeper, quieter kind of knowledge, one often held in the hands of those who left few written records. To see the full picture of ancient resilience, we must look beyond the temples and into the daily rhythms of the home, the garden, and the hearth, where women acted as the primary engineers of everyday survival. In countless societies, they were the intimate observers of the living world. As the main gatherers of wild plants, they catalogued which species flourished after a light rain or could survive a drought, knowledge that directly informed later domestication. As the primary water collectors, they knew every spring, seep, and seasonal stream, mapping the hydrology of their homeland with a precision born of daily necessity. This was not abstract science but applied wisdom passed from mother to daughter through demonstration and story. The technologies they developed were woven into the fabric of daily life. Consider the potter, often a woman's role across early cultures. By coiling and firing clay into jars, she was not just making containers, she was inventing essential climate infrastructure. These vessels allowed for the safe storage of water and grain, protecting the community's reserves from pests and spoilage, smoothing out the precarious gaps between harvests. Similarly, the weaver selecting specific plant fibers for textiles was making a climatic choice. She knew which reeds or cotton varieties were most resistant to rot in a humid climate, or which wool was best for insulation against mountain cold. Her craft was a direct response to environmental conditions. As healers, women developed a profound pharmacopoeia of local botanicals, their understanding of medicinal plants deeply tied to the seasons and the specific ailments that arose with them. This role made them custodians of biodiversity, knowing not just which plant cured a fever, but where it grew and when it should be harvested. We see this integrated knowledge in action in the Aztec chinampas, the floating gardens of Lake Texcoco. While often credited to imperial planning, the day-to-day cultivation and management of these incredibly productive plots was largely the domain of women. They understood the precise balance of water and mud, the companion planting of crops on each small island, and the cyclical replenishment of nutrients from the canal muck. Their hands-on stewardship turned these gardens into some of the most sustainable and productive farms in the ancient world. Within the household, women were the managers of vital reserves. The selection of seeds for the next planting was a moment of profound consequence. A woman would choose the plumpest, hardiest kernels from the harvest, instinctively selecting for genetic traits that promised a better yield under known conditions. She was, in effect, conducting a continuous, low-key breeding program that adapted crops to her family's specific microclimate year after year. The management of the household granary was an exercise in risk management, deciding how much to consume, how much to store, and how much to trade, decisions that determined whether a family weathered a lean season. This knowledge was typically transmitted matrilineally through shared work rather than formal instruction. A daughter learned which clay made the strongest pot by gathering it with her mother. She learned the signs of a coming storm by working alongside her in the fields. This created a resilient, decentralized network of environmental intelligence, held in many hands rather than a single central archive. So how does this change our understanding of ancient engineering? It expands the definition from something done by a specialized, often male, elite to a universal human activity. It reminds us that the most essential adaptations are often those that address the immediate, repetitive challenges of existence. The irrigation canal is an awe-inspiring feat, but the water jar that allows a family to drink safely for a day is no less brilliant in its context. This perspective completes the picture. A society's grand climate adaptations could only succeed if supported by a million small, smart decisions made at the household level, decisions about what to plant, what to save, and how to use every scrap of the local environment. Recognizing this diverse knowledge base does not diminish the pyramids, but it builds the homes that stood in their shadow. It shows us that resilience was cultivated in the quiet spaces of daily life, by generations of innovators whose names history never recorded, but whose legacy is written in the seeds we still plant and the waters we still seek. The most resilient food source was one that could walk away from a drought. While farmers sculpted the land, another brilliant strategy was unfolding on the move, a dynamic partnership with animals that turned herds into a living, breathing form of climate insurance. This was pastoral nomadism, not a primitive stage of development, but a highly sophisticated adaptation to the world's most challenging landscapes. On the vast steppes of Central Asia or the sun-baked deserts of Arabia, following the grass and the rain was not a choice, it was a master plan. The Mongols and the Bedouins did not fight the arid zones, they flowed with them, their entire society engineered for mobility. Their homes were collapsible felt jurs or woven tents, their wealth was measured in herds, and their calendars were dictated by the seasonal rebirth of distant pastures. This lifestyle was a brilliant risk management system. By moving their sheep, goats, horses, or camels to where the water and forage were, they avoided overgrazing any single area and ensured their livestock, their primary source of food, clothing, and transport, survived. They became living maps of microclimates, holding generations of knowledge about hidden springs and sheltered valleys. This deep environmental intelligence was matched by a biological one, achieved through generations of selective breeding. Zooarchaeologists who study ancient animal remains trace this quiet revolution. People did not just domesticate animals, they sculpted them for specific climates. In the scorching deserts, they favored traits that produced the camel, an animal with fat-storing humps, water-conserving kidneys, and eyelids that could seal against sandstorms. In the thin air of the Tibetan plateau, they developed the yak with its dense undercoat, large lungs, and ability to graze on tough, high-altitude grasses. In the Andes, the llama and alpaca were perfected, their soft wool providing insulation against mountain cold, and their padded feet causing minimal erosion on steep slopes. Each of these animals was a piece of tailored technology, a biological tool engineered by humans to unlock the resources of an extreme environment. Their utility went far beyond meat and milk. Animals became the engines of agriculture itself. The invention of the plow pulled by oxen or horses revolutionized farming, allowing people to turn heavier soils and cultivate larger areas, directly increasing food security. Their manure was not waste but a cornerstone of the nutrient cycle, returned to the fields as fertilizer or dried into cakes for fuel in treeless regions. In some cultures, dung was even mixed with clay to create stronger, more insulating bricks for building. The animal was a walking utility. Its hide became leather for clothing, containers, and shelter. Its wool or hair was spun into textiles for trade and warmth. Perhaps most critically, the herd acted as a walking larder. Unlike a granary fixed in one place and vulnerable to a localized disaster, animals could be driven away from a spreading drought toward better grazing or to distant markets in times of need. They represented convertible wealth on the hoof. This created a fascinating and often symbiotic relationship between nomadic herders and settled farmers. While history often highlights conflict, there was profound mutual dependence. Nomads would trade animals, wool, leather, and dairy products for the grains, pottery, and metal tools of agricultural settlements. Farmers might pay nomadic herders to graze their animals on harvested fields, naturally fertilizing the soil for the next planting. In times of crop failure, the herder's mobile protein could become a lifeline for the village. This exchange wove different lifeways into a single, more resilient regional fabric. Today, our industrial livestock systems achieve staggering scale, but often at the cost of this adaptive intelligence. Animals are frequently confined, separated from the land that once sustained them, and reliant on transported feed. This system is efficient but brittle, vulnerable to supply chain disruptions and concentrated environmental impacts. The ancient pastoral model asks us what we have sacrificed in our quest for stationary abundance. It reminds us that mobility and diversity were not signs of hardship, but sophisticated strategies for thriving on a restless earth. In their symbiotic dance with herds, our ancestors demonstrated that sometimes the smartest way to engineer your survival is not to build a fortress, but to learn how to follow the rain. Even the most brilliant waterworks had a breaking point. For all their mastery of canals and calendars, these civilizations remained guests in a house of immense and sometimes unforgiving power. Their engineering was a dialogue with nature, and there were moments when the dialogue broke down, when climatic forces arrived that were simply beyond the scale of any human design. We see this in the silent ruins of empires that once seemed unshakable. Take the Akkadian Empire, history's first great multi-ethnic kingdom, which unified Mesopotamia around 4,300 years ago. Its power was built on that same intricate network of irrigation canals we admired earlier, yet within a mere century it fractured and collapsed. Why? Paleoclimatologists, scientists who study ancient climates, have drilled into ocean sediments and ice cores, reading the planet's old weather reports. Their data reveals a startling clue, a period of severe, prolonged drought that gripped the region for possibly over 100 years. This was not a bad season or even a difficult decade. This was a climatic shift that redefined normal. The very canals that made Akkadian wealth possible became liabilities. As the rains failed and river levels dropped, the sprawling network could not be filled. Silt clogged the empty channels faster than a dwindling population could clear them. The agricultural surplus that fed cities and paid soldiers evaporated. The social contract, based on the state's ability to manage water, dissolved into conflict and dispersal. It was a system engineered for one climate, overwhelmed by another. A similar story unfolded over 1,000 years later among the Maya during what scholars call the Terminal Classic period. Their cities, with their precise calendars and sophisticated reservoirs, were models of adaptation to the seasonal wet and dry cycles of the Yucatan Peninsula. But again, climate data from lakebed sediments tells a story of exceptional stress. The region was hit by a series of intense multi-decade megadroughts, periods where annual rainfall may have fallen by half. The magnificent reservoirs at places like Tikal, designed to hold water through the regular dry season, were not built to withstand a drought that lasted a generation. As the water stores dwindled, so did the authority of the kings who claimed a divine connection to the rains. the social cohesion needed to maintain the infrastructure and follow the royal decrees likely frayed. The result was not a sudden vanishing but a gradual, painful unraveling, a migration away from the great ceremonial centers toward scattered, more flexible settlements. These stories introduce a critical concept, the environmental threshold. Every human system, no matter how clever, is built within a certain range of natural variability. The Mesopotamian canals could handle a few dry years. The Maya reservoirs could bridge a severe dry season. But when conditions pushed beyond that range, when a drought was so profound and so long that it exceeded the system's capacity to buffer and recover, a tipping point was reached. The engineering solution no longer solved the problem, it became part of the crisis. This concept of maladaptation, of a solution becoming a trap, finds a poignant example far to the north with the Norse settlements in Greenland. Arriving during the relatively warm medieval warm period, these Scandinavian farmers saw a landscape of green fjords and built a society mirroring the one they knew, with dairy cattle, hayfields, and stone churches. They were expert sailors and capable builders, but their cultural blueprint was fixed. As the climate cooled into the Little Ice Age, summers shortened and pastures failed. The Norse clung tenaciously to their identity as European pastoralists, refusing to adopt the successful subsistence strategies of the Inuit, who were thriving in the same landscape with a technology tailored to the Arctic, hunting seals and whales. The Norse engineering, their barns and their farming methods became a form of cultural inertia, locking them into a lifeway that the changing climate could no longer support. Their eventual disappearance is a stark lesson in the danger of applying a rigid template to a dynamic environment. So what does this sobering history ask of us today? It calls for a profound humility in our own planetary scale engineering. We build megacities in floodplains, relying on levees designed for yesterday's storms. We irrigate deserts with aquifers that took millennia to fill. The lesson from Akkad, from the Maya, from Greenland, is not that engineering is futile, but that it must be coupled with relentless flexibility. It asks us to design not for a static ideal, but for a spectrum of possibilities, to build systems that can fail gracefully and adapt incrementally. It reminds us that the most critical component of any resilient system is not the concrete or the code, but the social capacity to listen, to learn, and when necessary, to let go of what no longer serves the future. Recognizing these ancient limits is not an admission of defeat. It is an essential step in writing a wiser, more durable chapter for ourselves. Those ancient blueprints are not locked away in dusty archives. They are still written on the earth beneath our feet. You can see them right now from your own home. Open a satellite map and look at the Mesopotamian plain, that cradle of civilization. Zoom in, and you might notice faint, geometric lines etched into the soil, patterns that seem too regular to be natural. Those are the ghosts of canals, the skeletal remains of that vast hydraulic network, still visible from space after 4,000 years. This is our new window into the past, where technology like LiDAR and satellite imagery acts as a kind of X-ray vision, peeling back forests and farmland to reveal the fingerprints of ancient engineers. In the jungles of Cambodia, LiDAR revealed the true extent of Angkor, not as a few temples in a clearing, but as a sprawling, low-density metropolis with canals and house mounds, completely redefining our understanding of its scale. These are anthropogenic landscapes, places where the human hand has so profoundly shaped the terrain that its signature becomes a permanent part of the ecology. You do not need a satellite to witness this legacy. Hike through the Andes and you will walk on Inca terraces that are still cultivated today, their stone walls holding back erosion just as they did 5 centuries ago. In the American Southwest, the low-check dams built by the ancestral Pueblones still trap silt and moisture, creating pockets of green in dry washes that modern ecologists study as models for desert restoration. Even our modern infrastructure often follows these ancient paths. A highway through a mountain pass may trace the exact route of an Inca royal road, the Qhapak, because the engineers of the past already found the most efficient and stable path through the geology. A property line in rural England might follow the curve of a medieval furrow, a division of land that made sense for plow teams centuries ago. These features are more than historical curiosities, they are active participants in the present. An ancient reservoir, like some of the barrays at Ankara or the Stepwells of India, might still collect water for a local village. The nutrient-rich Terra Preta soils of the Amazon, created by indigenous people thousands of years ago, are still the most sought-after and fertile plots for farmers today. The very biodiversity of a region can be shaped by these old practices, with certain plant communities thriving along the lines of forgotten field boundaries or irrigation ditches. Archaeologists and geographers call this reading the palimpsest, seeing the landscape as a parchment that has been written on, erased and written on again, with each generation leaving a faint but legible trace. This makes every curious observer a potential detective. Have you ever driven past a field and seen a series of low, parallel ridges where no crop is planted? You might be looking at the remnants of ridge and furrow farming from the Middle Ages, a system for drainage. Notice a strangely straight line of trees crossing a modern farm. It could mark the course of a buried Roman road or a canal bank. This exploration connects us directly to the continuum of human ingenuity. These sites are not just ruins to be gawked at, they are living libraries of adaptive knowledge. They show us what worked, what endured, and how societies physically molded their world to meet long-term challenges. Preserving them is not merely about saving old stones, it is about safeguarding a catalog of proven solutions for sustainable living. When we lose one of these landscapes to unchecked development or erosion, we are not just losing a piece of the past, we are burning a page from humanity's oldest and most practical survival manual. Their value lies in their tangible proof, a demonstration that our ancestors were not passive victims of their climate, but active, intelligent shapers of their destiny. Their work is still here, quietly functioning, if we only learn how to see it. This tangible legacy begs a final, pressing question. If their solutions are still visible and sometimes still working in our world, what does that tell us about the solutions we are building for our own future? What patterns will we leave on the land for generations yet to come to read? Their fingerprints are not just on the land, they are in the blueprints of our future. Across the globe, a quiet revolution in design is looking backward to move forward, as modern architects and engineers realize that some of the most elegant solutions to contemporary climate challenges were perfected millennia ago. This is not nostalgia, it is a pragmatic rediscovery of what works. The ancient principle of thermal mass, so brilliantly used in Mesopotamian mudbrick and Andean adobe, is now a cornerstone of modern passive solar design. Today's sustainable buildings incorporate thick, dense materials like rammed earth or concrete that absorb daytime heat and release it at night, drastically reducing the need for mechanical heating and cooling. It is the same old physics applied with new precision. Even the iconic wind catcher of Persia is being reimagined. In places like the Masdar City project in Abu Dhabi, contemporary versions of these towers, coupled with advanced materials and solar chimneys, create natural ventilation that cools buildings without a single watt of electricity. It is ancient wisdom supercharged by modern aerodynamics. The logic of the Qanat is being revived for 21st century water crises. In arid regions from Arizona to Rajasthan, engineers are constructing modern infiltration galleries, essentially new Qanats, to passively recharge depleted groundwater aquifers. Instead of pumping water out with energy-intensive wells, these systems channel stormwater and treated wastewater into underground spreading grounds, allowing it to percolate slowly back into the earth, mimicking nature's own recharge cycle. It is a shift from extraction to restoration, a lesson directly borrowed from those who understood that water is a cycle to be supported, not a resource to be mined. Similarly, the genius of the Waru raised bed system of the Andes is inspiring wetland restoration projects. By recreating patterns of alternating water and land, conservationists are rebuilding natural filtration, creating wildlife habitat, and managing water levels in degraded landscapes, proving that ancient agricultural techniques can heal modern ecological wounds. On steep slopes from Nepal to California, the timeless technology of terracing is being deployed not just for farming, but for critical slope stabilization and erosion control. Modern geoengineering often uses the same graduated, walled structure to prevent landslides, manage runoff, and create stable land for agroforestry. It is a direct application of an Inca solution to a global problem. Above us, another ancient idea is taking root quite literally. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon might have been legendary, but the concept of the green roof is now a standard tool for urban climate mitigation. By covering rooftops with soil and vegetation, cities can reduce the urban heat island effect, manage stormwater, and improve air quality, creating a living echo of those mythical gardens. This revival extends to what we plant. In seed banks and research fields, agronomists are urgently turning to ancient and heirloom crop varieties, those thousands of potatoes or drought-resistant millets developed by our ancestors. These old seeds possess genetic diversity that modern monocrops have lost, traits for resilience to pests, diseases, and variable rainfall that we desperately need as our climate becomes less predictable. This is not a rejection of science, but a fusion where cutting-edge genetics helps us understand and deploy the robust libraries of life that traditional farmers curated over centuries. This broader body of insight is now recognized as traditional ecological knowledge, or TEK. From controlled burning practices used by indigenous communities to maintain forest health, to intricate fishing calendars based on lunar cycles, this deep, place-based understanding is increasingly sought by conservation biologists and land managers. It represents a different way of knowing, one of long-term observation and symbiotic relationship, and it is proving essential for creating effective, culturally grounded conservation strategies. So how do we move from admiring these examples to systematically weaving this time-tested wisdom into the fabric of our world? It begins with a shift in education, teaching engineers and planners not just the latest software, but the long history of human adaptation. It requires policy that values and protects landscapes shaped by traditional practices, not as relics but as active models. It demands humility, acknowledging that innovation is not always about inventing something new, but often about remembering something profound and adapting it with our new tools and materials. The past, in this light, is not a closed book. It is an open-source catalog of proven solutions, 1 million experiments in resilience conducted over 10,000 years. The question for us is not whether these ideas are relevant, but whether we are wise enough to read the catalog and brave enough to put its lessons to work. Yet the stone calendars and grand canals cast long shadows. For every thriving city sustained by these systems, there was a complex human ledger, a balance of benefit and burden that was rarely shared equally. The gleaming temples and overflowing granaries rested on a foundation of profound social engineering, where the distribution of security itself became a source of power and often of hardship. To understand the full legacy of these adaptations, we must ask a difficult but essential question: who truly paid the price for this engineered stability? The evidence from ancient cities tells a story of stark division. In the meticulously planned streets of Mohenjo-Daro, we see a remarkable standard of civic welfare, but even there, archaeologists note variations in house size and access to wells, hinting at social tiers. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, the contrast was monumental. The vast labor force that raised the pyramids or dredged the canals lived in cramped, temporary settlements of mud brick, while the priests and officials overseeing them resided in spacious villas with walled gardens. This was not a voluntary workforce in the modern sense. It was often mobilized through systems of obligation, like the Egyptian corvée, where citizens owed labor to the state as a form of tax. While some historians frame this as a communal duty that provided food and social cohesion, others point to its coercive nature, a required service from which there was little escape. The surplus grain that filled the state granaries, the very buffer against famine, was controlled by a managerial elite. Kings and priests derived their authority from their role as guarantors of the flood or the harvest. This gave them not just prestige but ultimate power over life itself. They decided how the surplus was distributed, who ate well, and who received only enough to continue working. This control over the primary resource, water and food, created a rigid social hierarchy that was incredibly difficult to challenge. Your place in society was often cemented by your proximity to the management of these systems. The human cost of the construction itself is a subject of ongoing research and reflection. Ancient records from Egypt, for instance, detail payments of bread and beer to work gangs, suggesting a form of organized compensation. But the physical toll of moving multi-ton stones under a desert sun or spending months knee-deep in canal silt would have been immense, leaving marks on the bones and the lifespans of those who performed the work. The stability achieved for the kingdom came at a steep personal price for thousands. Beyond the immediate laborers, these large-scale projects could reshape entire landscapes and displace communities. When a new canal was dug or a reservoir expanded, it inevitably altered water flow downstream. A village situated further along the river might find its own water supply diminished or its fields flooded by a new diversion. There is evidence from several regions that upstream water management for powerful city centers could lead to the decline or abandonment of smaller, downstream settlements. This is an ancient form of environmental injustice, where the benefits of engineering accrued to a central power, while the negative consequences were exported to the periphery. The very act of defining resilience was a political decision. Resilience for whom? For the urban population fed by the granaries, or for the rural communities whose water was diverted to fill them? For the elite who lived in the elevated, well-drained citadel, or for the commoners in the lower town more vulnerable to flooding? These systems, while brilliant, often centralized risk management in ways that protected the core at the potential expense of the edges. They could create dependencies, binding people to a place and a system that offered security but demanded obedience and labor in return. This is not to dismiss their achievements, but to see them in full dimension. Their story is one of breathtaking collective effort and profound social inequality, of survival secured through immense shared toil that entrenched the power of a few. As we face our own era of necessary climate adaptation, building new seawalls, redesigning cities, and transforming energy grids, their history holds a crucial mirror. It asks us to look beyond the technical blueprint to the social blueprint. Who will build these new systems and under what conditions? Who will be protected by them and who might be left more exposed? Will the benefits of green technology and climate-resilient infrastructure flow to all communities, or will they become another source of division? Learning from the past means honoring its ingenuity while squarely acknowledging its costs. It challenges us to engineer not just for efficiency or even for survival, but for equity, ensuring that the burdens of adaptation are shared justly and its protections are a right, not a privilege. The true test of our own resilience may not be whether we can build a smarter levee, but whether we can build a fairer world behind it. The wisdom of the past arrives not as a command, but as an invitation. After walking through 10,000 years of canals and calendars, the question becomes what we do with this legacy. It offers us more than wonder. It provides a clear and actionable blueprint for our own uncertain century. The first principle is perhaps the most vital, the power of deep, localized observation. Our ancestors did not apply a universal template. They became intimate students of their specific place, reading the language of local stars, soils, and seasons. For us, this means moving beyond one-size-fits-all climate solutions. It asks for city planners who understand the microclimates of their own neighborhoods, for farmers who know the water-holding capacity of their particular field, and for policies that empower communities to develop responses rooted in their unique geography and culture. This hyper-local intelligence is the antidote to brittle, imported systems that fail under local pressures. Closely tied to this is the ancient imperative of diversity. They did not bet everything on one miracle crop or a single water source. They cultivated thousands of potato varieties. They built redundant water systems with canals and cisterns and Qanats, and they preserved knowledge in stories, songs, and stone. Our modern systems, in contrast, are often monuments to efficiency through uniformity. Vast fields of a single genetically identical crop, energy grids dependent on one source, cities reliant on a solitary aquifer. The lesson is clear: resilience is found in portfolios, not monocultures. This translates to modern policy that incentivizes crop genetic diversity, invests in a mosaic of renewable energy sources, and designs urban water systems that harvest rain, recycle greywater, and protect natural watersheds all at once. The third lesson is one of relentless maintenance and intergenerational thinking. The splendor of Anchor or the longevity of the Nile cycles depended on an unbroken chain of care, the yearly dredging of a canal, the careful recording of a Nilometer, the passing of a seed from one generation to the next. We have built astounding infrastructure, but we often design for construction, not for upkeep. Our blueprint must shift to value the maintainers as much as the innovators, to fund the long-term care of green spaces and water systems, and to instill in education a sense of stewardship that looks decades, not just quarters, ahead. It is about building societies that are gardeners, not just builders. Ultimately, these practical steps flow from a deeper shift in mindset, the move from conquest to alignment. The most enduring civilizations saw themselves as participants within nature's systems, not separate managers. They engineered with the flood, with the slope, with the wind. For us, this means designing cities that work like forests, managing water like a cycle to be supported, and farming in ways that build soil health rather than deplete it. It is a call for biomimicry on a civilizational scale, for co-engineering with the living world. This is not a retreat to a primitive past, but the next step in a sophisticated, sustainable future. So we end with a question for you, drawn from this entire journey. Look at your own community, your own home. What one principle from this ancient toolkit, whether it is capturing the breeze, valuing a local seed, or simply observing the rain, could begin to transform your relationship with the world right outside your door? Their ingenuity is a gift across time, a reminder that the solutions are often already here, waiting in the patterns of the land and the legacy of those who learned to listen. From their celestial calendars to their hidden waterways, these ancient builders left us a profound inheritance. It is more than just stone and soil. It is a way of thinking, a blueprint for resilience written in the language of observation, adaptation, and community. They teach us that foresight is not about predicting the future perfectly, but about designing systems flexible enough to handle the unexpected. Their cooperation shows that the grandest projects were always collective endeavors, binding society together with a shared purpose. Their innovation, born within the strict limits of their environment, proves that constraint is not the enemy of creativity, but often its greatest catalyst. We stand now at our own crossroads, facing shifts in the global climate that demand a response of equal ingenuity and scale. Their story offers both a mirror and a map. In the mirror, we see our own potential for brilliance and our own capacity for short-sightedness. We see the danger of building systems so grand and rigid that they cannot bend, and the wisdom of solutions that are decentralized, diverse, and deeply rooted in place. The map they provide does not chart a specific route, but outlines a timeless method: listen to the world, build with its materials, plan for the long term, and hold the well-being of the community as the highest measure of success. Our tools are more powerful than theirs, but the principles remain unchanged. The true challenge before us is not merely to engineer new technologies, but to recover an ancient wisdom, to remember that sustainability is not a modern invention, but humanity's oldest and most essential craft. Their voices, carried on the wind through silent ruins and still functioning fields, urge us to look beyond short-term gains toward the legacy we will leave in the land. They remind us that every city, every farm, every policy is a statement about our relationship with the earth. Will we design for domination or for harmony? For extraction or for renewal? The past has spoken with a clarity that echoes across millennia. Now it is our turn to listen, to learn, and with both humility and courage, to write the next chapter in this enduring story of human resilience. If this journey through time has sparked your curiosity, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What ancient adaptation resonates most with you in our modern world? And for more deep dives into the mysteries that shape our past and inform our future, be sure to subscribe. Thank you for